Hey guys, we're back here with another podcast. And today we're going to be reacting to an interview that Tom Ascol had recently with NBC. Troy, you want to fill us in on some details?
Yeah, so recently Uganda passed an anti-homosexuality law, which essentially they basically said that if someone is caught practicing homosexuality, that could incur a number of penalties, including but not limited to imprisonment and death. So Ted Cruz, who is a senator from Texas, he came out and basically said, this law is an abomination. That's basically what he said.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we're going to give a lot of commentary on this, but anytime that you call a law that also sounds a lot like a law that was instituted by God at one point in history, if you call that law an abomination, that's treading into some pretty hot water, in my opinion. No matter what your view is on theonomy, anyone who calls a law that was instituted by God as an abomination, whether you believe that law applies now or not, I mean, man, you're treading on some pretty thin ice.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, that point aside, so Ted Cruz said that, and Tom Ascol kind of had the same. Tom Ascol is a very faithful, great pastor in Florida, and he kind of had a similar idea of what of how to respond to that as we just did. You know, we kind of what we said just now was basically what he said in response to Ted Cruz. You know, he said, say it to God, Ted. That's basically kind of how he put it.
Yeah.
Like, if you have a problem with this law, if you're calling this law an abomination, well, remember, who else instituted a law very similar to that? God.
Yeah.
You know? And so basically, because he had an exchange with Ted Cruz, Ted Cruz actually responded to him, and then Tom Ascol responded to him, so they had an exchange. And then something interesting happened. So NBC, who the last time we uttered those three letters in sequence, it was when they were doing a smear job on Doug Wilson. So what NBC did was they came in, they interviewed Tom Ascol, regarding this topic, kind of regarding his clash with Ted Cruz and what are his views on homosexuality and, how do you legislate that and all that stuff. And so today we're going to be reacting in a friendly manner, because we love Tom Ascol and we love his ministry. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
We're gonna stand with him here. But we're gonna be reacting to his clip that he put out.
Yeah.
So
let's do it.
all right.
So you agree that homosexuality should be a crime?
I think homosexuality should be prohibited in a society that's going to flourish. And again, that doesn't mean that we go around and try to investigate everybody's activities, but what it does mean is the way that this nation existed for most of its history, where people who were adulterers, people who were fornicators, people who were pedophiles, people who were homosexuals, they didn't go out and parade that. They didn't have months celebrating that. They didn't try to groom others into their way of living their sexual lives. They realized, okay, we're out of step here with this society that is determined this is what's right and this is what's wrong.
Do you feel that your comments in any way are inflaming or encouraging people to rise up against a marginalized group of people who already are under attack?
Well, who are you referring to as marginalized?
LGBTQ folks.
They have a whole month celebrating themselves. I don't know why you would think they're marginalized.
Well, I mean,
I don't have a month celebrating my heterosexuality.
So, I mean, they were just given the right to marry. That was not something that, gay couples could do prior to that.
Can you pause it? That is a brilliant response. I mean,
Yeah,
and the fact that he said, like, I don't think that I haven't had a month celebrating the fact that I'm straight.
Yeah.
You know,
the whole like first half of this, we skipped like the first half because it was basically like introductory stuff, and then he was talking about, the interviewer asked him about, it was actually pretty funny. So the interviewer asked him, so like, so how do you choose between the Old Testament law? Like what's like, cause Leviticus, like where it says homosexuality is an abomination in Leviticus, it's coupled with a bunch of other texts in that same chapter where it talks about, you can't shave off the hair off your beard, stuff like that. You can't eat meat. Yeah. And so this guy, proposed a good question, how do you divide those laws? And obviously Tom would, as a Reformed Baptist, says, and as we're Reformed Baptist, says that, there's 3 divisions of the law. There's moral, ceremonial, judicial. Those ceremonial laws in Leviticus are basically, they're done away with in Christ because the New Testament clearly states that. And the funny thing was the interviewer then again asked, and he was like, can you please, he was like, so you can just pick and choose? And then Tom Ascol was like, again, let me tell you, there is 3 divisions of the law. Yeah. But, I just think of this, and obviously I don't think genuinely this guy is interviewing Tom Ascol to get information. He's just interviewing him to kind of like poke a hole, basically, or like kind of hook him. Yep. Yep. But even just when you see, like, because he asked the question, the marginalized group, right? It's just funny because, like, anytime like someone wants to, like, anytime like someone wants to push their agenda on somebody, it's always going to be like, well, we're the marginalized people, of the world. We're the people who are most oppressed. And it's like, really? Is that really the case, that you guys are like the most oppressed group in the whole world? I'm pretty sure it's Christians, because Christians are getting skinned alive in Afghanistan right now. If you want to know about that, I don't think homosexuals are getting skinned alive in the United States. But it's just, it's funny because, they get to, and like Tom Ascol said, they get to celebrate their own, they have a whole month. Like Tom Ascol said, that dedicated to their own sin and sexuality, to celebrate that they're gay. And yet Tom's like, well, we don't get that. If you're, in the United States, this is how intersectionality. This is how intersectionality works. If you're a straight white Christian male,
you're at the bottom of the pile.
You're at the bottom of the pile, and therefore we don't give you a day, to celebrate your whoever you are. It's like,
Yeah, and there's this prevailing thought throughout the culture that that guy hit on it. He basically parroted the prevailing view of woke culture.
Oh yeah,
is that the LGBTQ people that would identify themselves as that would falsely identify themselves as that, we would say, are an oppressed group somehow. In my preparation for this, I just happened to pop on a John MacArthur sermon today, and man, this was 6 years ago, and he hit the nail right on the head. I felt like I was listening to a sermon from yesterday. I really do. And basically what he said, and he identified the kind of the problem that people have been presenting today. And what people will say today is they'll equate the fact that that people in the LGBTQ community have been oppressed for years and years and thousands of years and stuff, and people will equate that to the fact that that black people were oppressed, like in the 1860s when there was slavery and stuff like that. They'll equate those two things. They'll say, oh, well, it's the same to be a black person and be marginalized and to be homosexual and to be marginalized, throughout history. But John MacArthur pointed out that that's not at all true. You can't control what color of skin you were born with. Yeah. And also the other thing.
That's true.
And also the other thing is, well, people might come back and say, oh, well, but I can't control who I'm attracted to. Yeah, but you can control what you do.
Yeah,
You can control
exactly.
what you do. And on top of that, that's something that if you come to Christ, like same-sex attraction and stuff, like if you come to Christ, Christ will give you victory over that. Christ
yeah.
doesn't need to give you victory over being black or something, because that's
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
sin.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and so just the fact that people in this culture now would equate, oh, well, the LGBTQ community has been oppressed for thousands and thousands of years, just like black people. Well, I mean, we have some problems with the narrative that black people have been oppressed for thousands and thousands of years too. That's another topic. You know, certainly chattel slavery was horrible and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was all terrible
Yeah.
and horrible, and there were issues and stuff like that. But to equate those two things to each other is just it's a non-starter.
Yeah, that's not a level playing field at all, because like you said, you don't choose to be black.
Yeah.
But you choose to be gay, okay? Like it's pretty simple. And there's another thing that this guy says, I don't know if we'll get to it, but because I do want to skip to another part later on in the podcast, but I don't know if we'll get to it, but just to mention it real quick, like he'll bring up how what was it? Well, you know what? The thought just came up my mind. Maybe it'll come back later. Well, that's how the podcast goes now. All right, you got anything else to say? Because I'll start
keep it
playing.
rolling,
Okay.
man.
But I don't think so. I mean, again, I think that's the wrong framing of the issue. They were in the Supreme Court's judgment said that they can do something the Supreme Court calls marriage, but that's not marriage. It's like saying, you know, I don't have the right to become a dog. I don't have the right to become an alien. You know, or, well, I'm being oppressed because of that. Well, no, this is the way the world works. God's the one who established marriage, and marriage is between one man and one woman. It's supposed to be for all of life. It's a one-flesh relationship. 2 men can't do that. 3 women can't do that. 5 people can't do that. That's 1 man and 1 woman. God's the one who created marriage. He's the one who defines marriage.
And I just want to be clear, you also think people who have affairs should be a criminal act?
Yeah, absolutely.
And explain that. I mean, what, should they go to jail? Should they be arrested?
Perhaps. I don't know. Should be fined. I mean, you think of how many women have been abused by men because they have no consequences for the way that they treat their wives, or not even their wives, but just women in general. If we had the laws that we had on the books, if they were still enforced from 100 years ago, we would see far less of that.
You know, Pastor, respectfully.
You know, I kind of want to say first that, you know, I kind of respect Tom in this aspect that, you know, he just set the field, and, you know, because a lot of people will say, because we as Christians say that homosexuality is a sin, therefore we're like bullying the LGBTQ, you know, society because we say it's a sin. It's like, no, we're not, because we also condemn adultery.
Yeah.
We also condemn fornication. We just condemn sin in general.
Yeah.
We don't condemn just the homosexuality group, even though it's sin.
Yeah.
You know, and whoever comes to Christ will be saved, will be forgiven,
Yep.
no matter if they're a homosexual, transgender, fornicator, adulterer, liar, thief. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
You know, there's still sins. Of course, there's different degrees of sins, but you get what I'm saying. There's in a society where we want to see Christian law legislated, in a society where we, especially in a postmodern society where truth is relative, truth isn't even a thing, we want to see Christian law legislated, and not just for the homosexual to be not, I wouldn't say done away with, but to not let that be allowed, to basically not let that be legalized and let gay marriage be, you know, legalized and all that. But we also want to condemn adultery, fornication. So I respect, I love the point Tom made.
Yep.
And it's a good point.
Well, like you said, that's a great way to put it. As Christians, it's not just like we have some vendetta against homosexuality. We have a vendetta against sin.
Yeah.
We have it, right? Like and homosexuality just happens to be, in the LGBTQ stuff and all that stuff, that just happens to be the prevailing sin of the day. Right? That just happens to be the sin in which people are engaging, where they target children and mutilate them. So we have to fight against it. You know, we just know that that's not right. That's not honoring to God. If, you know, if some other sin was the sin of the day, you know, the sin of today that we were, you know, that we were going against, you know, if some other sin was the prevailing sin in our culture, then we would be fighting that one just as hard.
Exactly,
like, I mean,
yeah.
a perfect example is abortion, right? I mean, it's not that just proves to you that we don't have a vendetta against homosexuality. We have a vendetta against sin, against wickedness,
Yeah.
and all sin is wickedness. And like you said, of course, there's varying degrees. There's sin that will destroy society faster, like homosexuality and LGBTQ stuff.
Yeah.
And there's sin that will destroy a society slower.
Oh,
yeah.
that was what I was gonna say. Actually, I think it might be getting to it, so I'll mention it later if it doesn't come up. But anyways,
Yeah.
You got anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
We're talking about consenting adults who are entering into a situation that doesn't really impact anybody but those two people.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't think that's a fair analogy.
Yeah, well, and I can appreciate that. But I would also say, no, it does affect other people. This idea that whatever I do in my own private life has no bearing on anybody else. No man is an island. And what contributes to the welfare of a society is something that we all ought to be concerned about. And we can debate what those things are, and we might disagree. I'm sure we will disagree on them. But we ought to have civil debates as to how do we determine what's right and what's wrong. And then how do we order a society that enables righteousness and what's right to be promoted and what's wrong to be reduced. And I would say, yeah, I'm happy for that conversation. The United States, in which we live, that allows us the freedom to sit here and have this conversation today, was built upon the understanding that I'm contending for. The fact that there's a God in heaven, He created this world, He determines what's right and what's wrong.
What kind of
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna hit the point on was that point, and he just talked about it. How, I hear a lot of people say, you just keep your sin to yourself. As long as you do that in private and it don't affect me, then we're all cool. We're all chilling in our homes.
Yeah.
As long as you don't invade my home and push your agenda on me, then keep your sin in private and we're all good. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem with that is that, like I put out a reel this past week, and I basically said the worldview of homosexuality is the culture of death.
Mm-hmm.
If you have many homosexual relationships in a community, it's going to crumble. Why? Because they're not producing babies. And I'm not saying like every single human being has to produce a baby, because some can't.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is that God's creation mandate is that we be fruitful and multiply. And how can you be fruitful and multiply and bear children and raise them up rightly when you have a man and a man? First of all, a man and a man are not compatible and they can't produce babies.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is a man and a man cannot raise a children, because God created the world in such a way that a child needs a mother and a father.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
I just love how he hit that point, and Tom Ascol, I respect him for doing this interview, because man, he just like sets it down straight, and he does it, and he does it respectfully too.
Yes.
That's the other thing I like about him is
and one other thing I will say that you kind of brought to my mind, and that Tom Ascol kind of referenced. He had this quote, no man is an island, right? No sin done in private is going to be completely ineffective, right? Or said another way, the sins that you commit, right? The sins that you commit in private do affect people. They have collateral damage. All sin does have collateral damage. And all sin is also a slippery slope, right? Now, when you were talking, I was just thinking about when people initially pushed for homosexuality, when the LGBTQ community originally pushed for homosexuality, it started out as, what does it matter what two people do in the privacy of their own house? How does that affect you, Christian? Why do you care? Why are you sticking your nose in their business? Well, what has it morphed into in 2023?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, in the public square, affirm drag queens and people who want to sexually abuse children, then you are somehow hateful.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it morphed into. All sin is a slippery slope. All sin, right?
Yep.
And don't tell me otherwise, right? And it does affect not only do the small sins morph into large sins over time, but even the small things that you do in the privacy of your own house, in the privacy of your own life, they do affect other people. They have collateral damage.
Yeah, that reminds me of the verse in James. Sin gives birth to death.
Yeah.
Right? If you're cultivating sin, it's sooner or later in a society that we live in today, it will produce death, you know? And that's what I kind of referenced to earlier, is that homosexuality is a culture of death. And like you said too, like nowadays, if you don't accept drag shows and drag queens and all this stuff, then now we're gonna be persecuted because we don't affirm these people's beliefs. That's a lot different from the Christian gospel. We don't grab people by the necks and call them cuss words and spit on them and say, if you don't accept Jesus, then you're a bigot and you're hateful and we're gonna kill you, basically.
Yeah.
That's not how the Christian gospel works, and Tom Ascol brings it up later on in the interview. But what the Christian gospel is when we look at society, like for instance, like legislating law, we're not forcing people to somehow be converted to Christ. No, the gospel is what converts people to Christ. It's the power of the Holy Spirit that works through the preaching of the gospel that converts people to Christ, not the other way around, not through force. And that's what some people and that's what the LGBT community is doing. They're forcing this upon everyone else, and if you don't accept it, then you're a bigot, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I got one last clip to show you guys. This one is awesome. This one's awesome.
Hear this and feel judged by what you're saying. By when you say I'm no better than you, but what you're doing is wrong. I mean that gives a superiority feel to it.
Yeah, I know. It's because we don't want anybody to tell us what's right or wrong today. And again, to the degree that I do that with my own judgments, well, that's not right. But to the degree that I'm faithfully representing what the Bible actually says, then man, I'm being kind and loving. You know, if I'm playing with a rattlesnake and I think it's a garden snake, and you come up and slap it out of my hands, I might be mad at you because you hurt me. But when I come to understand that was a rattlesnake, I'll thank you because you've helped me to see what I didn't see before. And that's all I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. You know, a lot of people will say that, why are you telling me that homosexuality is wrong? Why are you trying to get in my business, basically, and tell me, why? And who are you, basically? Like, who are you to tell me this? And it's not your problem is not with us. Your problem is not with Tom Ascol.
Yeah.
Your problem is with the living and true God of heaven and earth.
Yeah.
That's who your problem is.
Yeah.
So, and there is objective truth. I'm not apologizing for this, because in a society of postmodernism, in a postmodern society, we believe that truth is all relative, like I said, but there is an objective standard. There is a God in heaven who is judge of all the earth. And there is an objective truth, and that truth is found in Jesus Christ. And if that is true, which it is, we must proclaim it as Christians, especially to you. And that's the most loving thing we could do, like he said, if you have, or I'll use his other analogy that he brings up later on. He talks about a doctor, and a patient comes over and he has cancer, and the doctor says, hey, you have stage 4 cancer, but guess what? I have the cure for it. And the patient goes like, why are you being so harsh to me? Why did you say I have cancer? I don't want that. We're providing you the cure. Can you not see that? I mean, yeah, it's bad news. Yes, you're a sinner. Yes, you're corrupting yourself by your own sin, but we're giving you good news.
Yeah.
Take the good news.
Yep.
It's a pearl of, it's like I think of the parable, and Jesus says the pearl, when the man found the pearl of great price, what did he do? He sold everything and bought the pearl because it was so worth it. And so that's the gospel, man. That's the gospel. Jesus Christ and redemption found in him is all worth it. So
Well, Ephesians 4:15 says to speak the truth in love, but you can't speak the truth in love if you ain't speaking the truth. So that's the reality. So many people want to nuance what they're saying, and they nuance all the truth out of what they're saying. Like they're like, oh, how can we effectively and communicate the truth? And there is a right way to communicate the truth, of course. But when you nuance the truth so much that you've nuanced the truth out of what you're saying, that's a problem, right? And that's what Tom Ascol is really getting at in this whole interview is we're not being hateful, because we're saying that homosexuality is a sin and that it's wrong and that it's an abomination. We're not. What we're doing is being loving. We're being loving because there is an objective truth that there is a God in heaven who counts homosexuality as an abomination, and he will one day punish all those who practice homosexuality, along with all those who practice sin and who did not trust in Christ and the finished work that he accomplished, right? Yeah. When he died on the cross for our sins. So that's really the message. That's what we're going for here. That's what we're trying to say is that we want to communicate the truth to you because that's the loving thing to do. So we're grateful for what Tom did. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.